The golden Mustang agonized, caught in the barbed wire. Ben sped up his Porsche, intending to drive past. Animal problems weren't his. But when he saw the faded sign, White Rock Ranch, he hit the brakes. That place, those mountains. What he discovered there changed everything forever. Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Do you believe in signs of destiny, or is everything just a coincidence? Because this story will make you question that. Let's begin. Ben Carter had a simple philosophy. Feelings don't pay the bills. At 62, he had turned that philosophy into $180 million. He had also turned his soul into something that would frighten the devil himself. That Thursday, he was doing what he did best, crushing other people's dreams with the efficiency of an industrial machine. The Miller family had resisted his purchase offer for 6 months. They resisted like a drowning person resists the sea, with desperation, but no real chance of victory. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. Ben placed the documents on the humble kitchen table, ignoring the tears of the 78-year-old matriarch. They were eviction papers. The debt had been bought. The lands were now his. "You have 30 days, he said, slipping his golden pen into the pocket of his designer suit. He didn't look at the photo of the grandchildren on the refrigerator. He didn't see the broken man trying to console his wife. Efficiency, that's what he called it. The kind of success that impresses in business magazines. The kind that impresses no one at 3 a.m. The Porsche cut through the dirt road like a blade. Ben called the office, confirming the next acquisition. 3 more families on the list. 3 more properties that would become mining craters. Progress didn't wait for nostalgia. That's when the engine coughed. Once, twice, it died. Ben snorted in annoyance, looking at the dashboard. Overheating, in the middle of nowhere, on a road his GPS didn't even recognize. He got out of the car, cursing under his breath, adjusting his expensive tie. The late afternoon sun turned everything golden, the kind of beauty he had learned to ignore decades ago. It was then that he heard the whinnies. Following the sound, he found something that made him stop. A Mustang, at least 8 years old, with a golden coat like ripe wheat, was caught in the barbed wire of an abandoned fence. The barbs had torn the skin of its neck and legs. Fresh blood stained its fur. The animal struggled, but each movement only opened the wounds further. Ben watched for a few seconds. Wild horse. It had never been tamed, judging by the desperation in its eyes. Strong, even wounded. It was probably worth $15,000 if treated properly. $15,000. That's what made him act. He took off his $3,000 jacket and threw it on the fence. He rolled up his shirt sleeves. He approached slowly, speaking softly, not out of affection, but because nervous animals injure themselves more, and an injured animal is worth less. The rescue lasted 40 brutal minutes. Ben cut the wire with a rusty pair of pliers he found on the ground. His expensive hands became stained with blood, the horse's and his own. His designer shirt was in tatters, his linen pants ruined. When he finally freed the Mustang, the animal stared at him for an eternal moment. Ben expected it to bolt. Instead, the horse just stood there, trembling, as if it no longer knew what freedom was. "Go," Ben murmured, gesturing. "Get out of here." But then he looked up and saw what was beyond the broken fence, the familiar mountains, the old wooden house, and the faded sign that made his blood run cold. White Rock Ranch. Impossible. Ben stood paralyzed, staring at the sign. White Rock Ranch. Those 2 words he had buried along with so much else. The Mustang remained by his side, as if witnessing something he himself didn't yet comprehend. He called his insurance, then the mechanic. 2 hours for the tow truck to arrive. 2 hours he didn't want to spend there, in that place that should have been demolished decades ago. But the horse remained still, lost, and lost animals don't survive alone on the open range. Ben sighed in annoyance. He picked up his phone and called the nearest veterinarian. Dr. Ethan, Ben Carter, I need an emergency visit. Injured wild animal. He gave the location, listening as the doctor checked his schedule. No, I can't bring it to the clinic. The animal needs to be treated right here. While he waited, he walked around the abandoned property. The house was standing but overgrown with weeds, the windows broken, the roof full of holes. He should have felt satisfaction, another rural property vanquished by time. Instead, he felt something akin to nausea. The veterinarian arrived before the tow truck, a man in his 50s, grey beard, calloused hands of someone who knew hard work. Wild horse indeed, Ethan confirmed, examining the wounds. About 8 years old, I'd say. Never set foot in a stable in its life. It'll need intensive care for the next few days. How long? Ben asked, calculating costs. Depends. If it doesn't get infected, a week. If it does... The veterinarian shook his head. Better not to think about it. But why are you taking care of a Mustang? It's not exactly your profile. Ben didn't know how to answer. In fact, he didn't know how to answer himself. Can you take it to your clinic? Wild horses don't adapt well to confinement. They can go into shock, stop eating. The ideal would be to treat it right here, in its natural environment. Here, Ben looked around. This property is abandoned. There's still running water and space. I can come twice a day. Ethan paused. It'll cost about $3,000, if it's worth it to you. $3,000. Ben spent that on a dinner. But something about that place, that situation, deeply bothered him. The Mustang watched him with eyes that seemed too old for an 8-year-old animal. Do whatever is necessary, he finally said. That night in his penthouse apartment, Ben couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony looking at the city he had helped build, buildings where there used to be country homes, malls where there used to be streams, progress. That's what he did. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the golden Mustang standing by the fence. He saw the faded sign, White Rock Ranch. The next morning, instead of going to the office, he took his spare car and returned to the abandoned property. He told himself it was just to check on the animal, protecting his investment. But when he got there and saw the veterinarian tending to the Mustang, when he saw the horse raise its head in his direction, something stirred in his chest. Something small, almost insignificant. But anyone who knew Ben Carter knew that wasn't normal. How is he? He asked. Responding well? He's a fighter. Ethan smiled. Have you thought of a name? A name. Ben looked at the animal, at the mountains, at the faded sign. Hope, he said without thinking, and immediately regretted the word. Hope. The word left Ben's mouth like a ghost from the past. He hadn't used that word in so long that it sounded strange even to him. The veterinarian didn't notice his discomfort, merely wrote the name on the chart. Over the next 3 days, Ben invented excuses to go back there, to check on the investment, to monitor the treatment, to ensure the money wasn't being wasted, lies he told himself as he spent hours watching the Mustang recover. It was on the 4th day that he found the box. He was clearing weeds around the abandoned house, another thing he couldn't explain, when he stumbled over a loose board on the porch. Beneath it, protected by thick plastic, was a faded shoebox. Inside, yellowed photographs, handwritten letters, and a notebook with notes on wild horses. The first photo made him sit heavily on the rotten porch steps. A man in his 40s, with a wide smile, holding a girl of perhaps 6 in his arms, both looking at a band of Mustangs grazing in the valley below. Ben knew that man. He knew that girl. This is where things get ugly, because it wasn't a coincidence, it never is. He opened the notebook with hands that began to tremble. The careful handwriting of Grandpa Joe Stone, his adoptive grandfather. Notes on the wild horses that had lived on those lands for generations. birth dates, characteristics, migration patterns. And at the end, a letter addressed to him. Ben, my boy, if you're reading this, it's because you've come back. I knew you would someday. The horses are still here. I still feed them every day, even in my old age. They are the descendants of those you loved so much as a child. Remember how you used to spend hours watching them, how you dreamed of being a veterinarian to take better care of them. I'm keeping these lands for you, son, for when you tire of running from what truly matters. With love, Grandpa Joe. The letter was dated 15 years ago. Ben quickly calculated. 15 years ago, Joe was 82. He had died 2 years later, alone, while Ben built his first million by destroying exactly the kind of place the old man protected. He looked up to where Hope was slowly grazing, still favoring her injured leg. The Mustang was a descendant of the horses he had fed with his own hands when he was 6. A descendant of the animals that made him dream of a life completely different from the one he had chosen. Ben had never cried at his grandfather's death. He was too busy, too important, too cold. He sent expensive flowers and didn't attend the funeral. Business didn't wait for sentimentality. Now, alone on that ruined porch, the letter trembling in his hands, he cried for the 17 years of silence. He cried for the unanswered calls, for the indefinitely postponed visits, for the broken promise to care for the lands the old man loved. Joe had died waiting for his grandson to return, waiting for him to remember who he was before he became who he had become. The Mustang raised its head and looked at him. In those eyes, Ben saw something that finally broke him, the same patient trust Joe had always had. The same unwavering faith that good people exist, even when all evidence points otherwise. Hope. That animal carried in its name everything Ben had lost along the way. His grandfather's letter was like a punch to his empty stomach. Ben reread it 5 times, each word piercing layers of ice he had built around his heart. Joe had died waiting for a grandson who had chosen money over memory, power over gratitude. The next day, his secretary called, irritated. 3 meetings cancelled. The partners wanted explanations. The biggest deal of the year was stalled because the company president had disappeared without a word. "Tell them I'm sick," Ben lied, watching Hope walk across the property. The Mustang still limped, but each day showed more strength, more will to live. "Mr. Carter, you're never sick," the secretary retorted. "Green Lake Mining is threatening to cancel the partnership if there's no response today." Green Lake Mining, the $40 million project that would turn 3 small towns into mining deserts. $40 million he would earn by destroying places like the one he was standing on. "Cancel everything," he said, and hung up before she could respond. He found the veterinarian applying ointment to Hope's wounds. The Mustang allowed itself to be touched now, but only by Ethan. When Ben approached, the animal still moved away. Wild recognizes wild, and Hope knew what kind of predator Ben had become. "How is he?" he asked. "Physically almost recovered, emotionally." Ethan paused. Traumatized wild horses sometimes never fully recover. They lose the ability to trust. They become too wary, too aggressive. They survive, but they don't live. Ben understood the metaphor. He understood perfectly. That afternoon, while organizing Joe's papers, he found another devastating surprise. A pile of letters his grandfather had written to him over the years, but never sent. Letters telling of the horses, of the seasons, of the loneliness of growing old waiting for someone who doesn't return. One of them, written 6 months before Joe's death, finally broke him. "Ben, today I saw in the newspaper that you bought more land in Montana. I know you're building your empire, son. I know you're proud of it. But I wanted you to know that I still feed the Mustangs every day, that I still protect this little corner you loved. Not because I think you'll come back. I've already understood you chose another path. I do it because I'm still the grandfather of the boy who cried when the foal was born injured. Because I still believe that boy exists, somewhere inside the man you've become. Ben folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He picked up his car keys. 2 hours later, he was at the Green Lake mining office door. He walked straight into the director's office, ignoring secretaries and security guards. "The project is cancelled," he announced. "Cancelled? What do you mean?" The man stood up, red-faced. "We have signed contracts, committed investors." "I'll pay the penalties, all of them." Ben placed a folder on the table. "My lawyer has already prepared the documents. $42 million to terminate everything. The money will be transferred tomorrow." "Are you insane? That's $40 million in profit." Ben smiled, a smile that hadn't appeared on his face in decades. "I discovered there are things that cost more than money." When he returned to White Rock Ranch, Hope was waiting for him near the fence. For the first time, the Mustang didn't move away when he approached. The decision to cancel Green Lake cost more than the $42 million in penalties. It cost his reputation, his partnership, and the trust of those who thought they knew him. His partners sued him. The specialized press crucified him. Competitors celebrated his loss of sanity. Ben discovered he didn't care. In the following months, while lawyers fought in court, he did something he hadn't done in 40 years. He visited people he had hurt. The list was long, frighteningly long. The first was Clara Miller, a widow he had evicted 3 years earlier to build a parking lot. Ben appeared at the door of the rented house where she now lived, a humble dwelling in the suburbs. She recognized him instantly. It was hard to forget the man who destroyed her life. "What do you want here?" she asked through the half-open door, the chain still latched. "To return what I stole from you," he said, extending an envelope. Inside was the deed to her old house, in her name, free of debt, no conditions. Clara didn't thank him, didn't smile. She just took the envelope, studied the documents, and closed the door. But as Ben walked down the stairs, he heard the muffled sound of someone crying from the other side of the wood. It was a start. The second visit was harder. John Peterson, a small farmer who had lost his family farm to Ben 2 years earlier. The man now lived in an impoverished neighborhood, working as a construction worker. When he saw Ben at his door, he simply spat on the ground. "Did you come to offer me a job at your company, or just to laugh in my face?" Ben extended another envelope. "Your farm is here, in your name, with compensation for the 2 lost years." John opened the envelope with suspicion, read the papers twice, 3 times. "Why?" he finally asked. "Because I learned that there are debts that interest doesn't pay." Not everyone accepted his reparations. Many slammed the door in his face. Some cursed him. Others simply didn't believe it was real. Ben insisted in all cases, leaving the documents even when rejected. Redemption isn't about being forgiven. It's about doing things differently, even knowing you might never be. Between visits, he always returned to White Rock Ranch. Hope was completely healed now, but hadn't left. The Mustang stayed near the property, as if understanding that was its place in the world. Sometimes other wild horses appeared. The herd was returning home. Ben began to renovate his grandfather's house, not to sell, to live in. He traded his penthouse apartment for the simplicity of rural life. His former colleagues thought he had completely lost his mind. Perhaps they were right. One afternoon, while fixing the fence, now without barbed wire, he received an unexpected call. It was Clara Miller. "Mr. Carter." Her voice sounded different, softer. I wanted to thank you. I didn't know if I should, but my granddaughter will have her own room again. She keeps asking if it's real." "It's real," Ben said, watching Hope graze peacefully. "And Clara, please apologize to your granddaughter for me, for taking her room away before." When he hung up, Ben leaned against the fence and took a deep breath. The country air smelled different from the city air. It smelled of possibilities, of new beginnings, of hope. The Mustang approached and for the first time allowed him to touch its golden neck. 2 years had passed since Ben found Hope caught in the fence. 2 years that transformed him more deeply than the previous 60. The White Rock Ranch now breathed life again. Wild horses grazed freely, the house was restored, and the project Joe had dreamed of finally existed. The Joe Stone Sanctuary officially protected 5,230 acres of native prairie. Wild horses, tapirs, deer, and other animals had a safe refuge there. Ben had invested $15 million of his own money to make it a reality, defying all the financial consultants who still dared to work for him. Hope, now 10 years old, led a small band of Mustangs that had returned to the region. The golden horse had become a symbol of the sanctuary, strong, free, but always close enough to remind Ben where it all began. That September morning, Ben woke before the sun, as he always did now. He brewed coffee in the simple kitchen, very different from the presidential suite he had inhabited for decades. Through the window, he watched Hope grazing with her band. The Mustang showed signs of age, some gray hairs on its muzzle, a slightly slower stride. In the wild, few horses lived past 15. Ben knew that each day was a gift. Funny, we spend our lives running from death until we realize it's the only teacher that truly teaches us how to live. The phone rang. It was Martha, the daughter he hadn't spoken to in 8 years. "Dad, I saw the report about the sanctuary in the newspaper." Her voice carried a mix of surprise and something he hadn't heard in a long time, respect. "I didn't believe it when I read your name." "And why did you call?" Ben asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Because I remembered Grandpa Joe, how you were when I was little, before everything got complicated." There was a long silence. Ben watched Hope approach the fence, as if she knew an important conversation was happening. Can I bring the boys to see the sanctuary? They've never seen real horses." "You can come whenever you want, it's your home too." After he hung up, Ben walked to the fence. Hope came to meet him, something that still surprised him after all this time. The Mustang allowed his touch now, but had never completely lost its wild nature. It remained what it always was, free. That afternoon, a young entrepreneur appeared at the sanctuary. He was interested in a commercial partnership. He wanted to turn part of the land into a luxury eco-resort. He offered $30 million. Ben listened patiently, recognizing in every word the man he himself had been. Limitless ambition, a worldview where everything had a price. "No," he said simply when the young man finished his presentation. "I don't understand. It's a generous offer for unproductive land." Ben smiled, pointing to Hope and her band grazing freely. "They are producing exactly what they should be producing. Freedom." The young man left, grumbling about lost opportunities and crazy old man. Ben didn't mind. He had been called worse when he was just like that young man. That night he found a letter in his grandfather's chest that he hadn't seen before. In Joe's trembling handwriting from his last days, "For the man Ben will become someday." Inside, just one sentence. "Thank you for coming home, my son." The 3rd anniversary of Joe's death fell on a sunny May morning. Ben woke to the familiar sound of Hope and her band whinnying. The Mustang was 11 years old now, old for a wild horse, but still strong, still proud, still free. It was the first anniversary Ben wouldn't spend alone. Martha arrived early with her grandchildren, Peter 8 and Anna 6, the same ages he and his sister were when they used to visit their grandfather. Life imitating life in a dance that only makes sense when you stop fighting it. "Grandpa, is that Hope?" Peter pointed to the golden Mustang watching the visitors from afar. "Yes, it is. And he's coming to meet us." To everyone's surprise, Hope approached the fence. He let the children carefully touch his velvety muzzle. It was the first time he had allowed contact with strangers. as if he knew these little ones carried the same blood as the one who had saved him. "Isn't he dangerous?" Martha asked, still wary. "He's wild," Ben corrected. "Wild isn't dangerous, it's free. There's a difference." In the afternoon, more people arrived. Clara Miller with her granddaughter, John Peterson and his family, Ethan, the veterinarian who had become a friend, sanctuary staff, people Ben had helped rebuild what he had destroyed. It wasn't a party. It was something simpler and deeper, recognition, the recognition that second chances exist for those brave enough to take them. During the community lunch, Peter approached Ben. "Grandpa, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you save Hope if you didn't like animals?" The question hit Ben hard. How to explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes we need to save others to save ourselves? "You know, Peter, I don't think I saved Hope. I think he saved me." In the afternoon, when everyone had left, Ben walked alone to the small cemetery where Joe was buried. There was a simple headstone surrounded by wild flowers that bloomed spontaneously. He sat on the grass beside the grave. "I took my time, didn't I, Grandpa?" he said aloud. "I took my time to understand that you never gave up. You never stopped believing that the boy who played with the foals still existed inside the man I became." Hope appeared behind him, as he always did when Ben came there. The Mustang lay down on the grass, a gesture wild horses rarely make near humans. It was his way of saying that this place was sacred to him too. "You're 11 now, buddy. In the wild, maybe 4 or 5 more years ahead. I, at 65, understand the feeling, but for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of the end. I'm certain that when my time comes, I won't die as I lived for 50 years, alone and empty." The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky golden, the same color as Hope's coat, the color of the Hope Ben had rediscovered in a barbed wire fence. There's no happy ending. There's an honest ending. And this was his. "I can't go back and be the grandson I should have been, but I can be different today and tomorrow, and for the time I have left." Joe believed in second chances. Hope gave me mine. Now, it's my turn to pass it on. This story is about regret, about words we didn't say, calls we didn't make, people we left behind while chasing things that don't matter. If you have someone you love but are distant due to pride, anger, or being too busy, don't wait to need a wild horse to teach you what truly matters. Call, write, show up. Because unlike Ben, you still have time. And if this story reminded you of someone, or if you believe in second chances, share it. We never know who needs to hear this today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.